Hello and welcome back to the MindAid Therapist podcast, Not Here to Judge. Here, we will have open conversations about mental health, and today's topic is our personal favorite, anxiety. I am Shravasti Chaudhary. I am a psychologist, and I have joining with me Mansi Jagtav and Shambhavi Deval, both practicing clinical psychologists who can give us a clinical perspective on anxiety. Please note, even if you can relate to some of the symptoms, please avoid self diagnosing. For a diagnosis, please consult your nearest mental health professional and understand that this podcast is purely for information and not a substitute for treatment or therapy. So, with that, let's just start. Shambhavi and Mansi, would you like to give a little introduction of yourself before we start on today's topic?
Hello, I'm Shambhavi Deval. I have done my MPhil in clinical psychology and I'm currently pursuing my PhD. I have an overall experience of 5 years in the field of psychotherapy and counseling, and my areas of expertise are anxiety, depression, and OCD.
Hi, I'm Mansi, and I've also done my MPhil in clinical psychology and have 5+ years of experience working with clients struggling with anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues. And it's so great to be back here today on this podcast.
Thank you for joining us today. And with that introduction, let us start with our topic. Today's podcast is known as Anchoring Anxiety. Just a little bit of information for our listeners. In 2017, 197.3 million people were diagnosed with mental disorders only in India, including 44.9 million with anxiety disorders. So, with that being said, we can see how common it is and how important it is that we talk about anxiety, understand it, and also learn how to deal with it. So, today's podcast, just to highlight, we'll be mainly talking about what anxiety exactly is, why it happens, and this will at least give us some information on why does this happen so often. Our part 2 will focus more on the tools and techniques that you can use every single day to manage anxiety. Now, here, Mansi and Shambhavi, we do have a few questions that I will bring forth to you. And, we want this to be a little more laid back because, we'll be using a lot of examples and a lot of research. And we all three know, right, that our research is really complicated and it can kind of go over our heads, even as therapists. So let's try to make it very simple for our listeners. I'll start with the first question. In layman terms, how can we explain anxiety? Now, as a person, how do I know if I'm having anxiety? What is anxiety? Anyone who can answer that?
So, I would like to answer that. When we talk about fear, it's more like having a presence of real danger. So, when you see a snake and what you feel after seeing a snake is fear. On the other hand, when we talk about anxiety, there's no real danger in there, but whatever you feel is always perceived, or you anticipate a future threat that, okay, this is going to happen to me in the future. So, anxiety is not a bad emotion at all because it gives you a survival instinct. If we talk in the frame of evolutionary perspective, so it keeps us alert, it makes us pay a lot of attention to our surroundings, it helps us to avoid any negative outcomes, and it's basically a protective emotion if we look at it in that way. So anxiety actually motivates us to seek social support, and it also helps us to maintain our level of creative thinking. So if I'm anxious or apprehensive about my upcoming examination, I'll actually be a little more productive than I am usually. So that's the difference between fear and anxiety.
Here I'd also like to add this point, and this is something actually Mansi had taught me, in our earlier days of practice, where if you have to understand anxiety, you can understand it in one sentence, which is it's an underestimation of our own capability to deal with a threat, and it's an overestimation of the threat itself. So that sort of puts into perspective of why we get so anxious when we are facing, even if it's a perceived threat. Another thing also, which I think is important to remember here, is that I often hear clients tell us that they seem a little confused with why are they feeling so many symptoms. Of course they don't say symptoms, but why are they feeling so many things? Sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's mental, and that confuses you more. That okay, if I'm feeling it, if it's an emotion I'm feeling, why do I feel it in my body? So here it's very important to also understand that anxiety is there are a lot of effects of it. You have your mind, which is your cognitive effects, and you have your physical effects as well. Now if you're looking at some emotional symptoms, they could be general worry, dread, feeling scared, feeling a sense of panic. If you're thinking of cognitive symptoms, this is, I think, everybody's favorite: overthinking, right? We call it also ruminating in our world. Another thing that we do is catastrophizing. What is catastrophizing? It's basically expecting the worst. And a lot of times you do, if you see any incident that has become horrible, you just go like, yep, I knew it's going to be this bad. So expecting the worst outcome. Fortune telling, where you're predicting that how things are going to work out, or jumping to conclusions. So these are few factors that come in when we are anxious, and these are our cognitive symptoms. Physiologically, in our body, where we what we feel, most common that I think, I've heard a lot of people say, is palpitations, breathlessness, even diarrhea. Especially I think it used to happen to us also before exams, where you're suddenly stuck in the washroom. So a lot of diarrhea, digestion problem. Other symptoms could also be dry throat, choking sensation, headache, nausea, fainting. So, in all, I think anxiety does manifest in a lot of ways in our mind and in our body, and which is why it makes it scary as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like there are so many symptoms and so much is happening. So no wonder you feel so overwhelmed.
Exactly. So, this also kind of connects us to our second question, which is, why do we feel so uncomfortable in our body when anxious? What is exactly happening there?
Right. So we need to understand first thing is that anxiety, like I think Shabosti explained correctly, is a both mental and physical state. And again, it's a normal response to a danger or a threat. And often the discomfort that we feel in our bodies is meant as a protective measure. So our body is trying to just prepare us to face the danger. Now, in terms of what is exactly happening in our body and in our brain, we need to understand that there are three major players in the game. So whatever I'm going to explain now is a bit technical, but I want to stress on the fact that it's important to understand this because it makes you aware of how your brain and body are changing in response to an anxiety provoking situation. And it's only because it's a protective mechanism and it's often adaptive. It helps us to act quickly in order to protect ourselves. So we'll start with who are the three main players in this game. So first one is amygdala. It's basically a part of the brain that processes emotions. It decides whether something is a danger or not. So sometimes it can be an actual threat like a tiger, or it can be a perceived threat like an upcoming exam. So amygdala basically works like a fire alarm that when it goes off, it alerts the second player in our game, that is the hypothalamus. So Shambhavi, can you tell us more about the second player?
Sure. So hypothalamus is more like a CEO who signals the autonomic nervous system. So autonomic nervous system has two branches. There is sympathetic nervous system and there is parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system activates the body and parasympathetic nervous system on the other way calms the body down. So both these systems control our body's response to danger. So the sympathetic nervous system is a branch of our autonomic nervous system which controls our fight or flight response. Let's imagine it's more like a accelerator on a car which speeds up everything and prepares our body for action. And what happens on a neurochemical level is it releases epinephrine and norepinephrine. And what happens to your body is your heart starts racing, you have very heavy breathing, your blood flows more to your hands and legs, your muscles might tense up, you're constantly scanning for danger, which is you're more vigilant, and it's difficult to focus at that point of time. It's difficult to sleep, and you might have some racing thoughts. So that's how your body prepares itself for the flight or fight response.
Right. So after that, what happens is when, and this is especially when there is a prolonged threat or the stress is ongoing, like maybe you have an exam that's going on for a period of like, let's say a week or two. After that, the adrenaline or the epinephrine which we have got in the body, in the brain, it kind of subsides, and then the brain releases cortisol to maintain this alert state for a longer time. And eventually, when the threat goes away, cortisol levels fall, and then the parasympathetic nervous system gets activated. This helps us to calm down, come back to normal. So you can think of the parasympathetic system as brakes on a car. It allows us to rest and digest. So, in conclusion, the brain and the body in the state of anxiety react as if your life is at stake, even if it's actually not. And the amygdala, which we talked about earlier, the emotional center, it is only concerned with your survival. So, essentially, it overpowers the prefrontal cortex. Again, this is the rational part of the brain. It does the rational thinking, decision making like an executive officer. It overpowers it and just makes you act very quickly in order to safeguard yourself. So yeah, that's about like how our brain and body, what they are doing when we are anxious, and that's why we feel what we feel.
So, from all these heavy words that you clinical psychologists have used right now, what I understand in simple terms, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that when we are anxious, our sympathetic nervous system gets activated. And in order to counter that, we need to activate our parasympathetic nervous system, which calms us down. Is that what it is?
Yeah, exactly. That's you summarize it quite well. And it's important to understand that because our rational part gets overridden by the amygdala, it's really hard for us to think rationally when our body is disactivated. So that's why it's important to activate the parasympathetic nervous system.
That is a great point that you've given, Mansi. Now, just emphasizing on this part, which is how to stop it, how to basically get out of this anxiety. Why can't we just stop the anxiousness? I remember this question has been posed to us so often, that why can't we just stop it? How do we just get rid of it? So what do you think? What really happens here?
All right. So there's no instant switch on and switch off when it comes to working on that anxiousness, because as we spoke about it earlier, the body is already set up its flight or fight response. So it's already been activated till the time your prefrontal cortex or your rational thinking center realizes that there's no actual threat there. But your body is already taken it for an actual threat. So now it's very difficult for your mind and body to coordinate or work on it at that particular moment, because your amygdala has already been amplified and it disturbs your rational thinking or cognitive functioning at that point of time. So what's important, as we discussed earlier also, it's important to basically balance or to activate your parasympathetic nervous system. And there are a lot of coping skills that can be used, say grounding techniques, to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which we will discuss in detail in our second part of the podcast.
So what do you feel? Do you feel that our lifestyle makes any difference to anxiety? And when I say lifestyle, I mean, of course, your sleep, your food, your exercise, especially in today's time, which is so vastly different from, say, even 10 years ago. Our lifestyle was so different. And now, post pandemic, it's absolutely different. So, do you feel this has an impact on our anxiety?
Yeah, that's a really good question and a very important factor to think about. Actually, there has been a lot of research done to understand the impact of our everyday routine or our daily habits, our lifestyle on anxiety. In fact, large meta-analyses have shown poor sleep to be associated with many psychiatric disorders. And as clinical psychologists, whenever we are, diagnosing poor sleep is actually one of the symptoms that is almost always included in almost all of the clinical disorders. So that shows that it is definitely associated with your mental health. Research has also shown that chronic sleep deprivation is associated with anxiety disorders, or it can actually cause an anxiety disorder. So let's understand the relationship anxiety has with sleep. The anxiety triggers a vicious cycle. You must have experienced, if you've ever experienced anxiety, you might have noticed that the more anxious you are, the more alert and activated your brain is. And then you find it harder to relax and fall asleep. This lack of sleep can again reduce your ability to focus and manage your anxiety the next day, making things worse. And REM sleep, which is called the rapid eye movement sleep, or also known as the dream sleep, is actually helpful in emotional regulation. So if you're not getting enough of this REM sleep during the night, it can actually affect your emotions the next day, and you can find yourself being more anxious or irritable.
And I feel like that's the first thing that we start compromising on, right? Which is our sleep. Because everyone is running around. It's such a busy, hectic lifestyle that we've picked up. Getting sleep at the end of the day is, it's first of all heavenly, but the minute we are on our bed, we often are just scrolling mindlessly on social media. This is also, I think, in a way, it's a phenomenon which is known as delayed procrastination, which is that you delay the onset of the next day. So you keep scrolling just to you get some time to yourself, and then you doze off to sleep. But then what happens is that you end up not getting enough sleep as it is. I know very few people who are getting like 7-8 hours of sleep a day. Most of the times it's like 4 or 5 hours. And if you add to that, say, having kids, full-time job, so many factors, it's so tough to get the sleep. So don't you think it becomes like a cumulative effect then on our body and on our mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I think sleep does play a very important role when it comes to our emotions. And most of the clients that we see do come to us with sleep disturbances, are diagnosed later with anxiety spectrum disorders. So, yeah, sleep has a direct relationship with anxiety. We can say that.
So along with sleep, is there any other factor also that plays a role? How about like our food or exercise? What do you think?
Yeah, I think your diet and nutrition do play an important role apart from sleep when it comes to anxiety. And there have been studies which talk about your dietary intake and its relationship with anxiety disorder diagnosis. So there was a study published which talks about your fruit and vegetable intake, and the conclusion is that people who consume less than 3 sources of fruits and vegetables daily, they were at least 24% at risk of developing anxiety disorder diagnosis. So your diet and nutrition, it does play a very important role along with the sleep.
I think just one thing maybe I'd like to add here is something that we kind of, don't think about or don't pay a lot of attention to, especially on our busy days, is hydration. And the more dehydrated you are, the more likely, you are to experience irritability, or it can just make your anxiety worse. So yeah, that's also something to keep in mind.
Now, linking it to that, there's also a lot of study about our gut health, right? And how it is connected to our mental health. So, what we can see is that it's not just us feeling anxious, but there are so many factors that play a role, be that our food, be that our drinking water, gut, even exercise for that matter, right? In fact, there's a meta review which was published in 2020 in the World Psychiatry. Now, what happened there is that they examined the current evidence of the role of lifestyle factors such as exercise, diet, sleep, and even smoking, like Shambhavi mentioned, it suggested that physical activity has a protective role in reducing risk for certain mental disorders, including anxiety disorders. So, physical activity, which means working out in some form or the other, it could be simple walking, gym, Zumba, anything and everything that entails some form of physical movement. Now, the irony is that in today's world, it is so difficult, right? When you're already running around the entire day, it has become harder and harder to fit in time for yourself to go and work out. So this is something I think we often sideline. I mean, even I feel even I do that a lot of times, where I do talk about the importance of working out, and then once I'm off working out, it's so tough to go back.
Yeah, that's so true. But even if we start very small, like start from 5 minutes a day or just once a week, slowly you will start to understand or realize the impact, the positive impact of paying attention or taking care of all these lifestyle factors, including sleep, your nutrition, your physical activity, and your daily habits. Of course, how to improve these is what we will talk about in detail in our part two of the podcast. So I guess then we can move on to the next question, shall we?
All right. So now that we have seen lifestyle makes an impact on us, why is it that not everybody has it? I feel like this is a very common question we've always, come across. Why do I have anxiety and not my friend? Am I weaker? Is this true? Does it make someone weaker? And why is that not everybody gets it?
I think having anxiety doesn't make you a weaker person. It is just how you experience a specific emotion. And there could be reasons that why you experience your anxiety and your friend doesn't. And it could be because of genetic predisposition. For example, your family member might have anxiety, and that genetic predisposition might come to you. Or there could be certain personality traits, like you are inherently a very shy person, or it's difficult for you to communicate socially, or you're a very self-conscious person overall, or you are a person who has a lot of mood swings, or you're someone who experiences a lot of negative emotions. Also, there could be certain environmental or situational factors or triggers that might trigger a particular emotion. For example, an upcoming work presentation or a job interview, or it could be trauma or a long term stress, or your experiences as a child also kind of act as triggers when it comes to experiencing anxiety. So, if you have experienced a lot of adverse situations or adverse family environment as a child, then automatically you would be someone who would experience negative emotions or anxiety in the future or as an adult. Also, your brain chemistry or the way your brain perceives to any threat is different when for different people. So it's not that I have anxiety and my friend doesn't. It's not as simple as that, but there are a lot of details to it which we have to understand rather than comparing yourself to your friend. And these are details which are beyond control a lot of times. So it's nobody's fault that that person experiences more anxiety than somebody else.
This one is basically the biopsychosocial theory, right? That you've been talking about. Yes, so here bio, of course, is the biological part of you, your psychological part, and then the social environment that you've been part of. I also adding to this the fact that it's not as simple like you've emphasized. It's not so simple you having anxiety but your friend not having. I think it's important for us to also focus on that we don't get empathy from a lot of people who've never experienced anxiety, right? Often you get called that okay, you're being over dramatic, or you're just taking things too seriously, or you just stop overthinking everyone. We get dialogues like that, especially from people who've not experienced it. So this lack of empathy also doesn't really help our case, I feel, when you're anxious.
Yeah, I think absolutely that how people respond to your stress or your communication to them It does definitely matter, and sometimes people do show a lack of empathy when you express something. So yeah, that definitely adds up to, you might feel weak, but you also have to understand that not everyone gets it, which is okay, and it's not their fault. Maybe people are not aware about it.
Yeah, and one more thing to think about is that anxiety is a normal emotion, as we've said before, and everyone experiences it to a certain extent in like different situations of their life. Like, everyone feels a little nervous before, or most people, a little nervous before a presentation or an interview or anywhere where their performance is going to be evaluated. Um, it's just that some people are more vulnerable or more at risk to experience the same anxiety in a more intense way. So it's not like, your friend is not experiencing anxiety. It could just be that they don't experience it as intensely as you do. And that definitely doesn't make you weaker. It just means that maybe, you need a little more help in managing it, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does make sense. And I think it's important for us to even acknowledge the fact that not everyone is experiencing any mental health struggle at the same level. Some are experiencing it at a lighter level and some at a harder level. But it's important for us to validate it and to give space to understand it. Even when we're talking about understanding, there's this one question that I often hear, and I'm sure both of you do as well. Some people, they say they're panicking, some people say that they're anxious. Now, what is the main difference? What is the difference between a panic attack and anxiety attack?
Yeah, rightly said. This is one of the most common questions that we get, and it's often used interchangeably. Like people call anxiety as panic and panic as anxiety, and it's important to just understand the difference between the two. So I'm glad that you brought this question up. So panic attacks, they are usually short in duration. So first comparison is in terms of the duration. So as I said, panic attacks are shorter, and they last up to like maybe 30 minutes, but not longer than that. Compared to that, anxiety builds up gradually over time, and the symptoms can be present, for a longer duration as compared to a panic attack. Now, the next difference is in the onset, like how it starts. So panic attacks often happen abruptly out of the blue, many times without a particular trigger. They can happen in any situation, like when you're sleeping or when you're somewhere outside in a public place. As opposed to anxiety, it generally has an identifiable trigger, or there are certain situations or circumstances which can cause you to feel anxiety. The third difference is in the symptoms themselves. So, for panic attacks, the symptoms are extremely intense. So, you might experience something like pounding heart, racing pulse, feeling of difficulty, getting enough air. So you might be like gasping for air, or you might feel a sensation of choking, chills, or excessive sweating, feeling even disconnected from your body or from reality. What we call as depersonalization or derealization in clinical terms, feeling as if you are about to die. And when you experience all this, you feel that you are losing control, and that can be very scary for a person. So as you see, it's very intense. And in anxiety, the symptoms can range from mild to severe, so they're not always this intense. But yeah, there is muscle tension, sleep disturbances, dizziness, shortness of breath, restlessness, and difficulty focusing. And the last difference is in the amount that it disrupts your life, to the extent to which it disrupts your life. So panic attacks are extremely disruptive. They 100% disrupt, whenever you're outside. If you're getting a panic attack, you won't be able to do anything else. With anxiety, it is less disruptive. but it can still impair your day-to-day functioning. And with panic attacks, because they occur like out of the blue, it can lead you to feel scared of having another one. So you usually start avoiding places where you've experienced panic attacks. So it can also lead to agoraphobia, basically fear of open or public spaces. So yeah, I hope that explains the difference between the two.
Yes, absolutely. I think it gave a lot more clarification between a panic attack and an anxiety attack. Now, this is my last question for this podcast. Why doesn't my anxiety just go away? Why does it keep getting worse? So, this question is another popular question, and I think I'd just like to address it first before we dive into the answers. Let's first of all normalize anxiety, right? That's what we keep talking about, that it's normal to be anxious. Unfortunately, in today's time of being connected all the time, there's multiple exposure to never ending stress. Anxiousness has seeped into our culture. We ourselves also experience a lot of anxiety, even as therapists. So, there are very few who are immune to this. Unfortunately, we cannot really shoo it away, but let's look at what makes it thrive in our system. Now, here there are two important factors. One is avoidance, and another is safety. So, we have our avoidance behavior and our safety behavior. So, ladies, let's break this down for our listeners. What is avoidance? Now, avoidance basically means you tend to avoid an event or any situation because it causes you anxiety. And that avoiding of it gives you the short term relief, but it gives you also long term anxiety. Example would be, say, public speaking or even socializing. Say in public speaking, you have to go up on stage or you have to give a presentation, and you start getting very anxious. And of course, you want to run away from it because that's what we want to do, right? From any form of threat. So when we are anxious, we might find someone else to do it for us instead of us going and giving that presentation, or we've backed out. Now, for the moment, it'll give you relief that, oh, you're safe. But it causes you to be more anxious about public speaking. And the next time that you again have to do, it puts you in overdrive. So avoidance is a very, very common factor that all of us end up doing.
Yeah, and what happens when you avoid things or avoid situations that make you anxious is basically you kind of lose out on an opportunity of, testing your fears out. Like, for example, like in public speaking, if your fear or your anxiety is telling you that, oh, I'm going to, make a lot of mistakes, or I'm going to mess this up. Now, if you were to actually go and do it instead of avoiding it, it might not be as bad as you expected, and it might give you this learning that, oh, it's not that bad, and the next time it becomes easier for you to face that situation. But with avoidance, it usually, the more you do it, it builds up over time, and then the next time you have to face the situation where you can't really avoid, there is so much more anxiety, and it just gets worse. So yeah, I think avoidance is one of the biggest factors that maintains your anxiety or makes it worse.
Here I think I'd like to just give a personal experience. For me, in my life, dance is a huge, crucial part. And all my life, I've been trained in dance. But ironically, I never danced in school. I think out of maybe 12 years, maybe one tiny event I might have participated. And now when I look back, the reason is because, of course, avoidance, your anxiousness of performing in front of all the school people. I avoided anything and everything that had to do with cultural events, which now I feel like, oh my god, I could have done that and maybe I would have been way better as well. Like, you lose out on so much of opportunity, just the way, Mansi, you were mentioning. And it seeps into you even from a time that you're not even aware that this is anxiousness. You're not aware of it. So yeah, it's there amongst kids, it's there amongst adults, and it doesn't matter what age you are, what situation you're in, it's always there.
Exactly. And avoidance is kind of reinforcing because, like Shravasti mentioned, that it gives you short-term relief. So because it gives you this relief, you feel like doing, or you automatically tend to do it again, because being in that situation is so uncomfortable and so difficult that avoidance feels a lot easier. But yeah, it is not helpful in the long run.
Absolutely. What about safety behaviors? What does safety behaviors look like?
Yeah, so safety behaviors are usually made in an attempt where avoidance is not possible. So if you're already in a social situation where you can't avoid it and it's difficult for you to escape from that situation, that's where you use your safety behaviors. So for example, I do this a lot when I run out of conversations in social situations. I do take out my phone and I scroll on my phone just to avoid those uncomfortable gazes or awkward silences. So for somebody who has difficulty in talking to somebody, or in terms of talking to people, and they are in a public transport, so what they could do in terms of safety behaviors is take out their headphones and listen to music. So this highlights that it's not a behavior in itself, but it's a function of the behavior that is important. Also, could you tell us your own experiences, Shabasti and Mansi, when it comes to safety behaviors?
So I think over here I'd like to tell the story. So for our listeners, I'm sure you all might not know, but Shambhavi, Mansi, and I, we were in the same college. We were in the same university also as students. And I used to use this with you guys. I don't know if you'll remember, but I have a thing with using public washrooms or any washrooms that is not mine. So every time I had to use a washroom, I would send one of these, either Shambhavi or Mansi, to go and first, evaluate the situation and come back and tell me if it was safe or not. So that was my safety behavior. And now, even 10 years after that, I still do the same. I've literally not worked on my anxiety with this at all. And now, instead of you two, I send someone else, whoever's available. And this has turned into a very, like, it's a permanent safety behavior of mine, which I just seem to not work on. So, yeah, definitely.
What about you, Mansi?
Oh, I can relate to this so much, and maybe I would share a little secret or like self-disclosure that I've struggled with social anxiety for the longest time, and now, of course, I've learned to manage it a lot better. But it gets triggered, especially in whenever I'm in a new situation or where I interact with new people, or if I'm in a new place. So when I first moved to the US, it used to happen a lot that when I have to go to a cafe and order a coffee, I would just not do it first. Like I would just avoid it, or otherwise what I would do is I would ask my partner to do it for me, because I used to get all these thoughts of making a mistake, or what if people judge me or they laugh at me. So yeah, this was my safety behavior, that either asking my partner to do it or just avoid it altogether if I can.
So here I'd actually like to also highlight something about Mansi, like how you mentioned you have social anxiety, and how this can be misinterpreted as well from another person's perspective, because they don't understand this, right? Example, I'll tell you, when we were in our university and Mansi would come for class. I don't know, Shambhavi, if you remember, but she would come in, she would attend, and she would just walk out, and she would never talk to any of us. So I remember all of us thinking, okay, maybe she has an attitude, or maybe she doesn't like us, or something like that. Like, we took it completely wrong that she doesn't like us, or she's too snooty for us. And it was later on that she told us that it was a lot of social anxiousness, which is why she was not really talking to us. So she used to come deliberately late to class just so that she could run.
Oh yeah, I was so scared, scared to death.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember her coming to the class, not talking to anyone and just attending the lectures and just walk out. And till the time we actually started speaking, and then we got to know her, and we just figured it out that, it's not about her attitude, but it was the social anxiety. So that can definitely create a lot of misunderstandings in your social circle as well.
So, yeah, as you can see, us therapists are also not immune to anxiety. And yeah, we experience it too. The bottom line is experiencing anxiety is normal, but it's how we react to it matters. Many people with anxiety might start judging themselves for it, that, oh, it's bad to have anxiety, or, questioning it, or just beating themselves up. And then they end up having anxiety about having anxiety. And one more perspective that I'd like to bring from the acceptance and commitment therapy approach is that there are certain things that, like, we are talking about things that maintain our anxiety and make it worse, are, mental strategies such as trying to suppress certain thoughts or emotions, which we often do, right, when we are uncomfortable, or distracting attention away from them. This actually maintains or even increases our anxiety. So just one thing to remember, that whatever we resist persists. So in the example that I gave before about ordering, my anxiety about ordering coffee, this creates a vicious cycle. So I feel anxious to order a cup of coffee, which leads to the fear of, which also has fear of making a mistake and people judging me. So it leads to me avoiding ordering or asking my partner to do it, which further leads to me concluding that, oh, I just can't do it myself, or I have to depend on someone else, or just feeling very sad about it. And it can then make me feel more scared the next time. So this is how it builds up over time.
So I think those were a lot of great points, ladies. And I guess with this, if we do come to an end to our part one of anchoring anxiety, it's always important to understand why we are experiencing an emotion in order to constructively manage it. So, keeping that in mind, we hope this episode helped you understand anxiety and also burst the misconception that anxiety is an enemy. Few pointers before we wrap it up. Shambhavi, would you like to give any 2 points that they would need?
Sure. I think number one is anxiety is normal. It's more like an adaptive functioning, and it's necessary for you to maintain your optimum level of functioning. Second, it's a survival instinct, and it's only your body and brain trying to keep you safe.
Fantastic. Mansi?
Yeah. So one more thing is, it is very difficult when it's too intense. Like, otherwise anxiety is normal, but it gets difficult for some people where it's too intense, or it's very disruptive, or it starts interfering with your daily life. Anxiety is not just in your mind, it can be, or it is most often felt in your body as well. And our lifestyle factors that we talked about, like diet, your sleep, your exercise, your habits, they play a big role in the way we experience anxiety.
Absolutely. And with this, I would also like to add a couple of points. The first being that having anxiety does not mean you are weak, it only means you're human. And the second, the more you avoid a situation which makes you anxious, the worse the anxiety gets. What you resist persists. So I hope with all of that, you have got a few pointers that you can always take home. With this, we come to an end of part one. We've covered a lot of ground about anxiety today. If there are any more questions, you're most welcome to drop us a message. You can find us anywhere and everywhere on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever you type in our name, you'll find us. We will come back with part two, where we talk about the tools and techniques, all therapist approved, of course, to anchor anxiety.
We hope you find this useful. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Our handle is MindAid Therapist. You can book a session with us on our website, www.mindaidtherapist.com. And we'll be back soon with our next podcast on anchoring anxiety part 2, where we will discuss practical tools and techniques to manage anxiety.
I am so excited to uh, talk about it, because I think that's the one which most users or most listeners will find helpful. So yeah, can't wait till we shoot the next one.
See you guys and looking forward. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.